Aerial confrontations between Russia and the US have intensified over disputed airspace, from intercepts in Europe to standoffs in the Pacific. US strategic bombers like the B-52 and drones like the MQ-9 Reaper often patrol near Russian borders, provoking aggressive responses. In 2025, a Russian fighter's attack on a US B-52 and MQ-9 Reaper ignited a firestorm, reshaping international relations and gripping the world in fear. Below is the account of this confrontation, from a deadly aerial assault to its unforeseen global consequences. On a turbulent morning in 2025, over the Black Sea near Crimea, a Russian Su-35 fighter jet locked onto a US B-52 bomber and its escorting MQ-9 Reaper drone on a reconnaissance mission. The Russian pilot broadcast warnings demanding they leave what Moscow claimed as sovereign airspace. The B-52 held course, radar sweeping relentlessly, the atmosphere electric. Suddenly, the Su-35 fired air-to-air missiles, one striking the B-52's wing, sending flames erupting as the bomber spiraled. The MQ-9 evaded briefly, but was hit, exploding in a fireball that lit up the sky. Alarms blared across U.S. command centers, turning the Black Sea into a powder keg ready to erupt with devastating force. The attack sparked a furious U.S. response. F-22 Raptors scrambled from a NATO base in Romania, engaging the Su-35 in a whirlwind dogfight, missiles streaking like comets across the dawn sky. A Russian jet exploded in a radiant fireball, debris raining into the sea. U.S. destroyers in the Mediterranean fired cruise missiles at Russian radar sites in Crimea, turning them into craters of fire. Russia countered with anti-ship missiles, one striking a U.S. frigate, sending plumes of water and metal skyward. Marines deployed to secure nearby assets, clashing with Russian commandos in brutal firefights amid burning wreckage. The Black Sea became a cauldron of smoke and flame, where every wave carried the threat of annihilation. The conflict surged into the electromagnetic spectrum with terrifying speed. Russia unleashed EMP weapons, disabling U.S. fleet electronics and grounding aircraft mid-flight. The U.S. retaliated, deploying high-energy microwave weapons to fry Russian radar and missile systems. Cyber attacks from both sides crippled command networks, with Russian hackers exposing U.S. troop movements and the U.S. seizing control of Russian coastal defenses. In the skies, AI-driven drones collided in fiery bursts, their wreckage raining onto oil tankers below, igniting infernos. The war expanded as allies scrambled, turning the Black Sea into a high-tech battleground where invisible pulses and fire merged in chaos. The strike escalated into a regional firestorm as Russia's allies launched rocket attacks on U.S. bases in Poland and Turkey. The U.S. struck back, bombing Russian airfields with stealth bombers, shaking cities with sonic booms. Explosions lit up the night, coastal towns engulfed in flames as fuel depots burned. Neighboring nations were drawn in, with Ukraine and Georgia bolstering U.S. defenses while Belarus deployed troops to support Russia. Global markets collapsed as energy prices soared, Black Sea shipping halted. Satellite imagery revealed a region choked in black smoke, marking a relentless phase of warfare that spared no one. The attack's fallout triggered a global energy crisis. With Black Sea oil routes blockaded, prices skyrocketed, plunging economies into chaos. Nations scrambled to secure alternative supplies, forging desperate alliances. Autonomous robots cleared contaminated zones, while international relief teams faced attacks delivering aid to ravaged coastal cities. The US and Russia, battered by losses, entered tense UN-mediated talks, but rogue militias fueled by the chaos launched cross-border raids. The crisis paused major hostilities, but fractured energy markets and rising insurgencies signaled a volatile future. The Ukraine-Russia war has seen numerous surprise attacks, with Russia's tunnel bases becoming strategic targets. Ukraine leverages intelligence to strike at critical moments, while Russia fortifies underground bunkers to shield commanders. In 2025, a Ukrainian JDAM strike on a Russian tunnel base during a high-level generals meeting shifted the war's tide, shocking the region. Below is the account of this confrontation, from a perfectly timed ambush to an outcome that left the world reeling. On a chilly evening in 2025, in a forest near the Belgorod border, Russian generals gathered in a secret tunnel base to plan strategy. Ukraine, tracking via intelligence, waited for all to enter. Ukrainian reconnaissance drones hovered silently, confirming targets. Suddenly, a 900-kilogram JDAM bomb from a Ukrainian Su-27 screamed down, piercing thick concrete. The explosion shook the earth, debris flying like a tempest, and the base collapsed in flames. Alarms blared across Russia. Rescue teams frantically dug, but the damage was catastrophic. The battlefield turned into a fiery abyss, setting the stage for a brutal infrastructure war. Russia retaliated instantly, launching Iskander missiles from nearby bases, pounding Ukrainian positions in Kharkiv with devastating force. Russian Su-34 jets roared in, dropping bombs on Ukrainian bunkers, shaking the city. Ukraine countered with lightning ambushes, using suicide drones to incinerate Russian convoys. A ferocious air battle erupted, with jets from both sides clashing in deadly chases. Black smoke choked the sky, relentless explosions rocking the ground, transforming the border into a chaotic war zone where every minute pulsed with danger. The conflict surged into chemical warfare with terrifying speed. Enraged by the loss of generals, Russia deployed sarin gas in Ukrainian areas, causing mass poisoning. Ukraine retaliated by destroying Russian chemical depots near the border, using viruses to trigger storage tanks. In the skies, drones collided, exploding in fireballs that lit up the night. Russian hypersonic missiles targeted Kyiv, but Ukraine's advanced defenses intercepted most, debris raining like a storm. The war expanded as allies joined, turning the border into a multi-layered flashpoint where chemicals and firepower fused in chaos. Russia launched a massive ground offensive, aiming to seize Ukrainian cities and cut supply lines. Tank convoys rolled in, sparking ferocious urban battles. Ukraine countered with rapid ambushes, using JDAM bombs to obliterate Russian armor. A massive explosion destroyed a Russian weapons depot, triggering floods and displacing thousands. Neighboring nations were drawn in, with Poland bolstering borders. The global economy reeled as oil prices soared from disrupted routes, and satellite imagery showed vast regions shrouded in smoke, marking an unprecedented phase of savage warfare. The attack's fallout triggered a global humanitarian crisis. Destroyed infrastructure displaced millions, flooding borders into Europe and Russia. Refugee camps overflowed, diseases spreading amid chaos as international aid struggled to keep up. The US and Europe organized emergency relief, but insurgent groups exploited the turmoil to rise. Autonomous robots cleared contaminated zones, while relief convoys delivered supplies under fire. Russia and Ukraine, facing humanitarian disaster, were forced into a temporary ceasefire, but new insurgent factions emerged from the chaos. The crisis paused the war, but swelling refugee flows and persistent disease threats signaled an unstable future. Drug cartels in the Americas have become a global threat, controlling smuggling routes from Mexico to Colombia, fueling violence and corruption. U.S. anti-drug operations frequently clash with these criminal organizations, but in 2025, a massive U.S. Marines raid changed the game, putting the cartels on the run. Below is the account of this war, from a covert operation to an outcome that shocked the world. On a moonless night in 2025, the U.S. Marines launched the largest raid in history, with thousands of elite troops storming cartel strongholds in Mexico, Colombia, and Honduras simultaneously. C-130 transport planes dropped paratroopers into dense jungles, while fast amphibious ships hit the coasts. Caught off guard by the scale of the attack, cartels scrambled to activate defenses, but U.S. drones obliterated guard posts with guided missiles. A massive explosion rocked a cocaine factory in Tijuana, black smoke blotting out the sky. Marines charged in, engaging in ferocious firefights, with heavily armed cartel gunmen, turning neighborhoods into blood-soaked battlefields. The cartels had no time to flee, and the hunt was on. The cartels struck back, using tunnel networks and armored vehicles to resist. In Mexico City, a cartel convoy slammed into a U.S. Marine outpost, a car bomb detonating with a blast that shook the city. The Marines countered with lightning ambushes, using Black Hawk helicopters to hunt fleeing kingpins. A highway battle in Colombia turned into hell, with cartel anti-tank missiles downing a U.S. helicopter, but Marines quickly encircled, wiping out hundreds of gunmen. Smoke and flames spread, jungles burning as cartels torched evidence to cover their tracks. The pursuit grew frenzied, with cartels using narco-submarines to escape, only to be intercepted by U.S. warships, turning the ocean into a war zone. The conflict spilled into cyberspace as cartels hired hackers to attack Marine command systems, disrupting communications and exposing troop positions. The U.S. retaliated by destroying cartel servers in Panama, using viruses to seize hidden bank accounts. In the skies, cartel drones struck U.S. bases in Texas, but American air defenses shot them down in a rain of fire. The war expanded as U.S. allies in South America joined, surrounding cartel hideouts in Brazil. Explosions and black smoke choked the skies, with nighttime battles turning cities into infernos, where gunfire and screams never ceased. The cartels called in reinforcements from international crime syndicates, leading to attacks on U.S. infrastructure in Latin America. A massive explosion destroyed an oil pipeline in Venezuela, sparking widespread fires. The Marines responded with rapid raids on cartel training camps in Honduras, using guided missiles to eliminate targets from afar. The war spread to border regions, with fierce battles in Mexico shaking frontier cities. The regional economy reeled as smuggling routes collapsed, and aerial imagery showed vast areas engulfed in flames and smoke. In a desperate move, cartels deployed chemical weapons, but Marines in protective gear swiftly neutralized the threat, turning the conflict into a living nightmare. The raid's fallout triggered a global crime crisis as cartels retaliated by sabotaging shipping routes, causing shortages of drugs and goods in Europe and the U.S. Nations scrambled to cooperate in rebuilding, with international task forces hunting remaining kingpins. Autonomous robots were deployed to clean up chemically contaminated zones, while relief ships delivered supplies to affected communities. The U.S. and surviving cartels, facing massive losses, paused hostilities to recover. But the region remained littered with wreckage, with new criminal groups rising from the ashes. The crisis temporarily halted the war, but emerging tensions and persistent crime threats signaled a chaotic future. Drone warfare has transformed the Ukraine-Russia conflict, with massive swarms becoming a decisive factor in battles. Ukraine's innovative drone tactics have challenged Russia's defenses, while Russia's industrial production fuels its own aerial assaults. In 2025, a massive Ukrainian drone strike on Moscow sent shockwaves through the region, pushing the war to new heights of intensity. Below is the account of this confrontation, from a sudden aerial onslaught to its unforeseen global repercussions. On a stormy night in 2025, hundreds of Ukrainian drones surged toward Moscow, their engines humming like a swarm of angry bees, targeting key infrastructure in a coordinated blitz. Russian radars blared with alerts as the drones evaded initial defenses, slipping through gaps in the S-400 system. The sky darkened with the mass, and the first strikes hit power grids, igniting explosions that lit up the city like fireworks gone mad. Alarms wailed across Moscow, streets emptying in panic as debris rained down. The Kremlin went on red alert, but the sheer number overwhelmed, turning the capital into a cauldron of chaos ready to boil over. Russia's response was swift and furious. Su-57 jets scrambled from airbases, engaging the drone swarm in a deadly aerial ballet, missiles streaking through the night sky in blazing trails. Ground-based. The battle plunged into cyberspace with lightning speed. Russian hackers launched a massive assault on Ukrainian command networks, disrupting drone controls and causing several to crash prematurely. Ukraine countered by infiltrating Russian power systems, blacking out entire districts and sowing confusion in defense commands. In the skies, AI-guided drones clashed, exploding in mid-air fireballs that illuminated the panic below. Hypersonic missiles from Russian silos targeted Ukrainian bases, but advanced intercepts turned them into streaking comets of failure. The war expanded as NATO allies jammed Russian signals, turning the conflict into a high-stakes digital duel where every second counted in a storm of fire and code. The drone assault ignited ground battles as Russian special forces hunted Ukrainian infiltrators suspected in Moscow. Streets erupted in firefights, with explosions shattering buildings and civilians fleeing in terror. Ukraine responded with precision strikes on Russian supply lines, turning highways into infernos of twisted metal. Chemical agents deployed by desperate Russian units contaminated neighborhoods, forcing evacuations amid choking smoke. Global economies trembled as oil prices skyrocketed from disrupted routes, and satellite feeds showed Moscow's iconic landmarks shrouded in flames. The capital became a labyrinth of destruction, with every alley a potential trap and the escalating nightmare. The strike's fallout triggered a global backlash, with international sanctions crippling Russia's economy and sparking internal revolts. Protests turned violent in St. Petersburg, leading to a military coup that ousted key leaders. Ukraine capitalized, launching ground offensives that reclaimed territory amid the chaos. Relief convoys flooded in, but insurgent groups rose from the rubble, turning former allies against each other. The crisis temporarily halted major hostilities, but new factions and lingering threats signaled an unstable future.